There is a slab of concrete in Florida with 16 pickleball courts painted on it and no roof. 40,000 square feet on 4.5 acres off County Road 466. 16 championship indoor courts, 2 more outside, bocce, a cafe, a pro shop, a lounge upstairs with a bar. In April 2024, the company building it threw a press event to celebrate reaching the halfway point. It was never finished. In early January 2025, the company that was building it posted a message online. It said, and this is the whole statement, "It is with great sadness that we must announce that we have closed the company. We did not have sufficient financial resources to continue operations. 2 clubs they had already opened, in Lakewood Ranch and in Port St. Lucie, shut. Members at Port St. Lucie reportedly got less than 24 hours notice." Now here's the part that does not fit. Pickleball is not in decline. It is the fastest growing sport in America and has been for 5 years running. 24.3 million Americans played it last year. That is up almost 23% in a single year, and up 479% since 2020. So the sport is growing faster than almost anything in American life. The courts are genuinely full, and the people building clubs for those players are going broke. Both of those things are true at the same time, and that is not a contradiction. It is the business model. By the end of this, you will know exactly why a packed court can lose money, what the 24 million number is actually hiding, and what happened in Sweden between 2019 and 2024 that tells you precisely how this ends. Let's start with which version of this you think you are buying. When somebody says they want to get into pickleball, they mean one of 4 completely different businesses. Version 1. Paint. You have a dead tennis court, or a car park, or a warehouse floor, and you put lines on it. Cheapest entry into the sport, and it is barely a business. You are renting time on a surface. Version 2. The conversion. A tennis club that turns 2 of its courts over, or a dying big box unit with the shelving pulled out. This is the one most people are actually imagining because they have watched a mall unit sit empty for 3 years and thought, that could be 8 courts. Version 3. The club. Purpose-built, climate-controlled, memberships, coaching, a pro shop, a bar. This is what the Pickleball Club was building. It is a leisure facility, and it is a construction project first and a sport second. Version 4 is the one you cannot buy. The sport itself. The tours, the leagues, the paddle brands, the television rights. That money is real, and it is nowhere near you. And notice something about the first 3. They all make money the same way. Somebody pays for time on a court. Not for the sport, not for the community, not for the 16 championship-grade surfaces, for an hour. Which means everything depends on how many people will pay for an hour, how often. And that is where the famous number falls apart. 24.3 million. It is in every article about this sport, and it is real. The Sports and Fitness Industry Association counts it, and they are the people the whole American sports industry uses. But they do not publish it as one number. They split it in 2. On one side, what they call casual players, 16.8 million of them. On the other side, what they call core players, 7.48 million. And a casual player in this system is somebody who played somewhere between 1 and 7 times last year. Once? Twice? Maybe on holiday. Maybe at a work thing. Maybe their neighbor had a set of paddles. 2/3 of the 24 million are people who tried it. Now I want to be straight with you about this. The industry uses different thresholds for different sports, and I could not confirm from the association directly that 8 is the exact cutoff they use for pickleball. But it does not actually matter where you put the line, because look at what the line is. The tier they call committed, the serious ones, the core of the sport, is defined as playing roughly once a month. Once a month. Here is what a club needs. A club needs somebody who comes on Tuesday and again on Saturday. It needs that person 52 weeks a year, and it needs several hundred of them, all living within about 15 minutes of the building, all willing to pay. So when a developer looks at 24 million players and sees a market, they are looking at a number where 2/3 of the people played fewer than 8 times in a year, and the committed third is committed at the level of once a month. The sport is enormous. The customer base is not the same size as the sport, and it gets harder because of where those people already play. Think about how you, or somebody you know, actually started playing this. Almost nobody's first game was in a climate-controlled facility with a membership agreement. It was on a public court, a tennis court somebody had taped lines onto, a rec center, a church car park. A retirement community that put 4 courts in because the residents asked. That is the sport's great strength, and it is the club owner's central problem. Pickleball spread as fast as it did precisely because the barrier was almost zero. Cheap paddles, a small court, easy to learn, and free places to play everywhere. That is the whole reason there are 24 million players. But it means a club is not competing against other clubs. It is competing against free. And the sport's biggest single advantage as a hobby, that anybody can pick it up, translates directly into the thing that makes it hard to monetize. The person who plays 4 times a year was never going to buy a membership, and the person who plays once a month probably is not either. So the club is fishing in a much smaller pond than the headline suggests, for people who already have somewhere to play for nothing, in a sport whose entire cultural identity is that it is easy and cheap to start. Except there is something happening to those free courts, and if you own a club, you should want to understand it very carefully. Because at first glance it looks like the best news you could possibly get. Pickleball has a noise problem. Not a volume problem exactly. A pitch problem. The ball is hard plastic and the paddle is a solid face, so instead of the soft thump of a tennis ball, you get a sharp crack, several hundred times an hour, and it carries in a way that tennis never did. Reported measurements put it far above a tennis strike, and people who live near a court will tell you they can hear it through a closed window. And homeowners have started going to court about it. In Lone Tree, Colorado, a town of about 14,000 people just south of Denver, the city opened 6 pickleball courts in 2023. The complaints started almost immediately, and in June 2024, 5 neighbors filed a public nuisance lawsuit. They asked the court to stop play entirely until the courts were enclosed inside a soundproof structure. In Halifax, Nova Scotia, after years of complaints, a city committee agreed that the courts at Castle Hill Park should be turned back into tennis courts. And in Boise, Idaho, 2 homeowners sued the city over the noise from courts at 2 different athletic complexes. The city settled. As part of the settlement, it agreed to convert the courts back to tennis, and crews started the work. Read that again from the club owner's chair. A city removed pickleball courts by legal agreement. The free competition is genuinely under attack, and in some towns, it is losing. So the obvious conclusion is that the sport has to move indoors, into a building, away from anybody's bedroom window, which is exactly what every developer has concluded. And indoors is where this business goes to die. Here is the trap, and it is the same trap that catches gyms, nightclubs, and cinemas. A building like that has almost entirely fixed costs. The lease, or the mortgage, the heating and the cooling, which for a 40,000 square foot indoor space in Florida is not a small line. The lighting, the insurance, the front desk, the maintenance on 16 courts. Those numbers are the same whether the building is empty or full, which means the entire business lives or dies on one thing. What fraction of the available court hours are actually sold? And a court, unlike almost any other product, cannot be stored. A Tuesday at 11 in the morning that nobody books is not inventory you sell later. It is gone. So when you walk into one of these places at 7 on a Wednesday evening, and every court is full, and there is a queue, you are seeing the 2 or 3 hours a day the model works. What you are not seeing is 9 in the morning, or 2 in the afternoon, or all day Monday. That is why the packed court and the failing club are not in conflict. The packed court is the peak. The business is decided in the other 11 hours. And this is where the thing compounds. Because when a sport is booming, everybody builds at once. Every developer looks at the same participation chart and the same empty retail unit and reaches the same conclusion in the same 18 months, which spreads the same peak hours across more and more buildings. The 7 o'clock rush does not get bigger, it gets divided. We know exactly what that looks like, because a country already did all of it, from start to finish, with a different racket. The sport is called padel. If you have never seen it, picture a smaller tennis court enclosed in glass walls, played in doubles, where the ball can come off the walls. It is huge in Spain and Latin America, and around 2019, Sweden fell in love with it completely. And Sweden had exactly the conditions we have now. A sport that was easy to start, a public that took to it fast, long, dark, cold winters, which meant indoor courts, and a lot of empty industrial buildings. So they built. Between 2019 and 2022, Sweden went from a few hundred courts to more than 4,000. In the city of Uppsala alone, the number of courts went from 14 to almost 100 in 12 months. 12 months. Now, the demand was real. People genuinely wanted to play. The courts were busy. And it did not matter. In September 2023, Bloomberg reported a figure from CreditSafe, the credit reference agency. Almost 90 Padel-related companies had filed for bankruptcy in Sweden in that year alone. The biggest operator in the country was a chain called We Are Padel, backed by a private equity firm. 300 employees, more than 80 venues. In October 2022, it filed for corporate restructuring, and within weeks, 16 of its facilities had gone into bankruptcy. By the end of 2024, according to the Padel trade press, it had closed around 50 of its 63 Swedish clubs. Across the country, more than 100 facilities closed or were converted to something else. Industry estimates put the total capital destroyed at somewhere close to 500 million euros. And I want to be clear, that is an estimate from inside the industry rather than an audited figure. And the causes people give are always the same three. They overbuilt, they borrowed to overbuild, and then the energy bill arrived. Because in southern Sweden, the average price of electricity went to roughly 5 times what it had been before 2020. And a Padel hall is a very large, very well-lit, very heated box. The cost of simply keeping the lights on in an indoor racket facility went up by a multiple, at exactly the moment that too many facilities were splitting the same players. That is the whole mechanism, and none of it required anybody to stop loving the sport. The players never went away. Sweden did not fall out of love with Padel. The courts were still busy while the companies that owned them were going through the courts. Which brings us back to Florida. The pickleball club was not a bad idea, badly executed by people who had never seen a paddle. It was the premium version of exactly the thing everybody is currently being told to build. Country club quality, indoors, climate-controlled, in Florida, where the demographics for this sport are as good as they get anywhere on Earth. Reporting at the time said the company had spent upwards of $10 million on its venues. It opened 2, was halfway through a third, and ran out of money before it finished. And it is not alone. A company called Bounce Pickleball in Delaware went into bankruptcy, leaving its landlord waiting on a court process to find out when it could relet the space. A 44,000 square foot Pickleball Kingdom flagship in North Dallas was temporarily shut after the franchisee holding it went bankrupt before new owners took it on. Different states, different owners, different amounts of money, same shape. A large fixed-cost building, built for a peak that only lasts a few hours a day, in a market where several other people had the same idea in the same year. But the one I keep thinking about is Boulder, Colorado, and it is the one that did not fail at all. Boulder Pickleball opened in 2023 in a 19,000 square foot warehouse on Frontier Avenue. 5 full-size courts and 2 practice courts, rentals, classes, clinics. It was the only indoor pickleball in the city. It closed 3 weeks before I wrote this. Not because nobody came, because the company that owns the warehouse is knocking it down to build a performance and event center. Boulder now has no dedicated indoor pickleball courts at all. And that is the version nobody warns you about. You can do everything right, fill the courts, build the community, survive the shakeout, and still lose the building because you were only ever renting the one thing the business actually needs. Meanwhile, the participation numbers keep going up. 22.8% last year. Both things, at the same time. Still. So who does make money here? Look at what survives in every one of these cycles. Not the building. The things with almost no fixed cost. Coaching, where the asset is a person and the overhead is a bag of balls. Paddle and equipment brands, which sell into all 24 million players, including the ones who play twice. Organizers who run leagues and tournaments on courts somebody else pays to heat. And the version of a facility that tends to survive is the one where pickleball is an addition rather than the whole business. The tennis club that converted 2 courts and kept everything else. The gym that put 4 courts in a room it was already paying for. In both cases, the courts are a reason to come, not the thing that has to carry the mortgage. The version that keeps failing is the pure play. The dedicated building whose only product is court hours, in a sport where most participants play a handful of times a year and can play for free 10 minutes away. The sport is not the problem. 24 million people are not wrong. Pickleball is genuinely, obviously fun, and it is going to be here for a very long time. It is just that a booming sport and a good business are 2 completely different objects, and one does not deliver the other. There is still a slab in Florida with 16 courts drawn on it and no roof. The demand was never the thing that was missing. Every one of those courts would have been busy. That was never in doubt. The question nobody asked was who was going to pay for the 11 hours a day when they were not.